Curiosity is a wondrous gift we've been given as a species. But because we love to contradict ourselves, we deem certain topics taboos. We don't talk about them because it's uncomfortable or unpolite, from mental health to politics. However, some of us choose to be extra curious and run the risk, like the cat, dying of curiosity. I grew up in a house with two parents that, apart from being teachers, were political compromise beings that passed on me the lookout for human rights. So when I moved schools in 7th grade and went to a bigger public high school downtown in Santiago, the capital city where I am from, I was immersed into a larger student body than I've ever been before that demanded to have knowledge of certain questions they wanted to be answered. One of the topics they were very fond about was sexual education. At age 12, the maturity and kindness this was addressed to me made me realize the responsibility I had with my body, myself, and others when taking decisions of this nature in the future. For various reasons, at the middle of 8th grade, I changed schools again. And the day I met my classmates, I was presented with curious smiles and looks about my short hairstyle, my tomboy way of dressing, my pronouns, etc. After a short while, we engaged into a conversation about sexuality with an openness many of them have never had access to before. That was one of the first key moments I realized how much people my age wanted to talk about these topics, but also how peers that had a bit more of knowledge in those areas could impact the conversation to go into educational levels. Later that year, an event that changed mine and someone else's life took place. In a PE afternoon class, where we could not go running because pollution was too much in the air of the city, we were sent to the computer lab. I was having a conversation with one of my best tomboy friends at the time named Tony about labels. They were a bit into the conversation, telling me that despite the label everyone decided to give them based on their assumed sexuality, they had actually always felt like the opposite gender they had been assigned at birth. I looked at them in the eyes curiously, raising an eyebrow, and asked, "But hey, do you know the word transgender?" They shook their head, and after that I proceeded to sing the definition of it: someone who does not identify with the gender they have been assigned at birth. In that instant, I saw how fireworks bloomed inside their eyes, bright and shining, very uncommon for their so often gloomy looks. They came from home the next day to hug me in the most honest way possible, thanking me for having pronounced a term that encompasses a big, important part of who they are. From that day on, he started his transition, trying new pronouns, a shorter haircut, different names, and even a chest binder. And as we graduated from 8th grade, our friendship drifted apart. But a couple years ago, he reached out to tell me that, with the support of his mom, he was changing into a new high school where he would be recognized with everything and his recently changed legal name, Vicente. I moved to high school and, again, luckily, found myself in a school that had a student-led collective, this time, working on sexual education. I joined, and after a year or so, we were going to conferences, seminars, talks, and forums to speak about the ways we were leading in peer-to-peer sex education at a national level. There, I gained all the skills that are allowing me to be in front of you today, but most importantly, the perspective that allowed me to understand the impact I had on my friend's life. Imagine what I, that was a kid, 14 years old at the time, could do with one definition, a little bit of knowledge, what you, the current and future generations of adults, teachers, and parents can. Sexual liberation sounds like a pretty strong concept, because it is. But put simply, it represents the idea to be free, with oneself and others, proudly and without internalized impositions based on emotional repression or shame. It is not only who we love, how many, how do we choose to establish our relationships, but also our relationship with self-image, our potential to engage in conversations that are active and make sure we are satisfying our needs in certain relationships, or also as simple as how to put a condom. In one sentence, it is having the necessary skill set to have a joyful and healthy sex life. Because of the nature of this subject, it's a bit awkward, and I personally strongly believe that it cannot be approached with anything but a very good sense of humor. It feels like you're talking about something you shouldn't. It brings giggles into rooms and makes people laugh, but it's charming, and it enchants some of us that decide to make this a lifelong militancy path. One of these people was philosopher Emma Goldman, that long ago in the 1800s says that if I can't dance, it is not my revolution. Thus, I invite you to think about sexual liberation with me in this manner. Think about it as a party. Not everyone likes the adrenaline-inducing dance floor. Some people just prefer to go out for a drink with their friends, listen to some music on a living room for a whole afternoon, or just have tea with their family. There's endless possibilities because we're diverse, and that's the beauty of it. Moreover, imagine that to these hypothetical sexually liberated parties, we could come as we are, whether that means full-on high heels and lipstick or just pajamas. Moreover, all conversations that are happening in the time would be carried on with respect, to not tap into each other's boundaries, and for the major sake of collective learning. Now, imagine your particular sexuality. It's like some sort of party you host. You'd let whoever you feel more pleased and comfortable in, not anyone else. You set the music, the lighting, maybe even a fun dress code, and most importantly, the language to engage into conversations where you feel safe in your own space. Now, there's other curious people, right? And there's other parties going on. If you choose to be part of those who love to acquire a bit more of knowledge, just because you want to get to know about other people's way of dancing, talking, or just having fun, you choose to jump into raves full of potential to create constellations based on interest. And if the group you happen to find is acquainted with the idea of sexual education or liberation, you guys could host a party where there's not only dancing, but also workshops, who knows, about the major aspects of sexual liberation, such as pleasure, consent, or menstrual hygiene. What would your life as a whole look like as if you were partying on the Dance Dance Sex Revolution party? Maybe you wouldn't be so afraid to tell your partner or partners about that insecurity you have regarding anything it is, from your performance in the bedroom to your body image. Or you would go and confront that person and tell them that their way of treating you is not making you feel comfortable. Or maybe even have the skills to name, identify, and know how to denounce sexual assault that you might not have had the access to of a safe space before to do so. Young people in our lives could come to anyone in our societies to ask us questions, so that when they're faced with decision making, they can take those decisions to the best of their communities and their knowledge ability. I am aware this concept is quite idealistic, so let's look at some real facts and figures from today's world, so we can put a bit of more substance to it if you might want. UNICEF says that about 1 in 10 girls under the age of 20 have been forced to engage in sex or perform other sexual acts, which unfortunately might be some of them audience members. RAIN says in the US only that 1 in 53 boys under the age of 18 experience sexual abuse or assault at the hands of an adult. UNICEF again says that genital female mutilation is suffered at least by 200 million girls and women alive today living in 31 countries, which could be one of those that you're living in at the moment, not necessarily. Polaris Project says that child kidnapping is actually not a very common occurrence when trafficking children, but rather online grooming, which is a highly concerning statistic, taking into account the youngest of this generation has almost unlimited access to phones or the internet. Common geographical knowledge says that the most vulnerable communities to human trafficking are refugees, migrants, religious minorities, women, children, disabled, and LGBTQ plus people. It's even on my geography IB textbook. They teach us these things in school. Of less deadly concerns, if you'd like, Durex, the famous condom brand, made a study a couple of years ago in Belgium and the Netherlands that says that 20% of women cannot orgasm from penetration only, as opposed to 2% of men. Lastly, Harvard Publishing says that the better your self-esteem, the better your sex life. Great sex is often the outgrowth of a deep emotional connection, something that is not guaranteed by having a perfect body. All of these examples are all over the place, I'm aware. But it is because sexuality, human sexuality, it is a matter integrated into thousands of little issues at a transnational level that becomes personal. The way we think about this shapes our judgments, and in some unfortunate cases, drives our actions that might be more harmful than we think. Or, as put by great speaker Amy Jo Goddard, if it wouldn't be so important, we wouldn't have so many shame about it, we wouldn't have so many rules about it, and we for sure wouldn't have so many taboos about it. I want to pause here and make a very important disclaimer that for some people might validate the whole point of what I'm trying to give you as a message. Sexual liberation is not debauchery, but rather just more openness to talk about sexuality as a whole. Not only the eroticized, pornographic version that is overrepresented in media these days. It is not to oppose to marriage, religion, or to turn children and adolescents into sexualization. But rather, it is a revolutionary invitation to connect with our body and mind and the long-forgotten part of ourselves, our sensuality, where exploration is encouraged, age-appropriately and according to context, as well as responsibility for your sexual health, which can start by a regular checkup to your local sexual health clinic. It is never forcing a fetishistic lifestyle into you, but rather making absolutely, thoroughly sure everyone in this world has access to sexual health and all the tools that will allow us to bloom as adults in the future, and healthy adolescents as well. I propose an approach to this wicked issue, as we call it in geo class, that focuses on three main aspects we should target as a society if we dream of a more sex-positive world. First, education. It is the most urgent, and it produces short-term and long-term results that can be from knowing how to name and identify, as I said a couple of minutes before, sexual assault, or reduce birth rates in countries like Bangladesh through the use of contraception. We need age-specific, integral, emotionally supportive educational resources, institutions, programs ready to respond to our questions, not only from the young people in school, but also adults, so we can know about the hardships of conception or how to live a thriving life with HIV. Second, legislation. We need a law system that subscribes to your sexual reproductive rights, that if you did not know, range from the right of being free from inhumane treatment and torture, to the right of body autonomy and integrity. Governments must make sure all sexual reproductive health systems and services are available for those who want to exert these human rights and take informed and accompanied decisions on things that could affect their life for the rest of their time here. Third, a culture-integrated approach. Our world is full of different cultures that are rich in their own way. Why not take advantage of it? Thus, progress towards a more sexually liberated society should not be another imposition of the Western standardized version of development, but rather tailored and unique to its context. Additionally, we must embrace practices lost long ago to colonization or imperialism. As an example of this could be vertical birthing in Bolivia, which is a practice that was done by indigenous people way before Columbus got into the continent and is still alive today. Great, But what can I, one person at a time, do about all of these problematics? Start simple. Educate yourself. It's actually harder than it sounds like, but knowledge is power. Use it. It might help you connect with certain histories and narratives, those closest to you have to say, that might shock you or enlighten you with a new experience. If you want and can, organize with more people that dream of a more sex-positive world, so you guys could push law changes that make sexual education available, or teach it yourselves. Make sure your representatives and governments are doing their job, if not. Lastly, connect with your heritage and think about creative ways of connecting these two different worldviews of this positive aspect of body embracing versus something that you might have super ingrained in you, but both of these ideas both work towards the greater good. There have existed thousands of immensely sexually knowledgeable societies. From the ancient Hindu temples that picture images of the Kama Sutra book, which is still referenced until today, to the Moche people in Peru, who normalized the body and the erotic in the West, which is just an expression of our natural part, our sexuality, to the Samburu people in Kenya that created an only woman's village to fight against female genital mutilation and forced marriage, the Umoja village. Let's not be afraid to confront and look at that part of ourselves that is hurting, craving for justice, moaning and whining for us to pay attention to. Let's become a loving and supporting community of individuals who are unapologetically connected to their sexuality. Let's give children the opportunity to grow up free from sexual abuse and assault, connected with their bodies, not shame and fear. Let's be in tune with their natural desires and fantasies. I will leave you with Chilean writer Pedro Lemebel's writing from his manifesto, I Speak for My Difference, to make you think about that kinky way of you being unique and different from each other, that I personally think you should hug and embrace. No necesito disfraz, aquí está mi cara. Hablo por mi diferencia, defiendo lo que soy. Y no soy tan raro, y la injusticia me apesta. I don't need a costume, here's my face. I speak for my difference, defending what I am. And I am not that weird, and injustice stings me. Thank you so much.